So good afternoon. Last session of the day, a pretty challenging one. So we have some surprise up our sleeves for all of you, and I hope it's well accepted by the team. So last few sessions, in fact, all that we are going to talk about in this session about building a sustainable pipeline of women leaders in organizations has been slightly touched by everybody. Every session and right from the beginning of the day has touched on this aspect. There's something about people metrics and business metrics which also got touched in the CEO session, but I thought before we go there, we'll just have a quick glimpse of it through a video. So we'll do that and then we proceed. So can we have that?
Harvard Business Review study showed that a business group's collective IQ went up when there were women on the team. And yet, only 12 of the Fortune 500 companies are run by women. So what are the other 488 missing out on? Communication. Firms with more women on their boards have 42% higher sales returns, 66% higher return on invested capital, and 53% higher return on equity. Take Yahoo's new CEO, Marissa Mayer, who laid out a strategic outline for the declining company and watched the stock gain 5.7%. Closing at $16.67, its highest level in over a year. These success rates are often linked to superior communication skills. Studies show while women speak fewer words in a day than men, they actually have a better command of the language for getting their point across. Initiative. In a study by Harvard Business Review, women in management were rated 11.58 percentile points above their male peers at taking initiative in the workplace. Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo, forged ahead with a plan to focus on more nutritious drinks despite criticism. It's a risk that could turn a $10 billion business into $30 billion in just 10 years. Emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, author of The Brain and Emotional Intelligence, New Insights, states that truly effective leadership is distinguished by a high degree of emotional intelligence. And according to Goleman, women on average outdo men when it comes to sensing a person's feelings in the moment. Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay and current CEO of HP, was featured in Psychology Today for leading with emotional intelligence. Under her 8-year reign, eBay was the fastest growing company in history. In her book, The Power of Many, she writes, "I believe that being willing and able to actively listen is a vital skill for any leader. Not only is listening the right thing to do, an antidote to arrogance, it also leads to all sorts of competitive advantages." To learn more.
So that was just a quick glimpse. Women bring to the corporate table a number of advantages, right from the quality of leadership, growth and profitability, yet the numbers are dismal. And not making to the top, we heard right from the beginning, is just a mere number of 15, 16, 17% make to the top. And then in India, we heard there is a 6 to 9% which makes to the top. So in this particular session, what we want to do is explore this aspect from 3 perspectives. What is it that the organizations can do to create a sustainable pipeline? What are the policies, practices, culture? What can be done from an inclusion perspective? And what can be done maybe from a pay equity perspective, all the negotiation that we heard in the last few sessions. So that is something that we will explore. The second aspect that we want to explore is managers. What can leaders and managers do? So often we hear managers say, we are not against hiring women. We want women to join. But just being open to hiring women may not make the shift happen. Actively working towards hiring women, having practices that can look at it, giving it a priority, may really make some change happen. But we'll hear from all the panelists on this. And what is it that women themselves can do to climb the corporate ladder and be there? So that is what we're going to explore in this particular session, in this panel. And I have 3 eminent panelists here, very, very experienced in all these aspects. However, how we'll approach this whole panel discussion is a little different. We want the audience view also. So what we're going to do is, as I ask a question to the panelists, we will have a question with multiple choices flashed on the screen. And you all have been given this voting meter. Do you see it in front of you? There are these ABCD choices. You will have 30 seconds to press any one of them. And the results like KBC will be on the screen. So we get a view from what the audience thinks. And of course, that will make the discussion richer because we will have the views of the panelists, we'll have audience view, and we will know how to chart out the way forward. So let me begin with the first question, which is around what can organizations do in this area? And Amita, I'll call upon you to talk about what can organizations do to create this. But just before we do that, we flash this question: what are the measures that organizations need to undertake to build a healthy pipeline for women leaders? You have the ABCD answers, and you have 30 seconds. Your time begins now. Okay, so provide enabling environment and policies, 48%. Build senior leadership commitment, 21%. Equal number for presence of role models, and then 10% reservation for women in senior leadership roles. So a lot of votes for what you're going to speak on. So Amita, all yours.
Great. This is a wonderful way to gauge what you guys prioritize and have in mind. So again, just if I may, a show of hands, how many of you are team leaders in your respective organizations in the businesses that you work in? Managerial / team leader / leader, show of hands? Okay, the majority. The reason I ask this is because the question to me and to all of us is, what should organizations do? And the answer to that is several things that need to be addressed simultaneously. Building the women leadership pipeline, as we all know, is about enhanced retention and enhanced focus on advancement. For enhanced retention, today it appears to me, every day when I read the newspaper, now it's becoming table stakes to introduce progressive policies and programs. Extended maternity leave, for example, is going to in fact be a legislation very soon. So the sooner we all adopt it, the more progressive we will be, and it will be a game changer for each one of us in the marketplace to attract talent. But let me call out the one or two things that I believe make all the difference. One is the tone at the top. The reason I requested show of hands for how many of us are team leaders or business leaders and in managerial positions is because I just want you to reflect and ask yourselves, how frequently do we put inclusion on the agenda for our team meetings? Whether it's once a week or it's once a month, we all call for team meetings and business meetings. How often have we put inclusion on the agenda? How often have we asked ourselves, how are we doing with respect to diverse hiring? How are we doing with respect to diverse retention, which is gap, if it's gender that we're talking about, then are we, I know we all as organizations measure it. Somewhere some analytics team is measuring all this data all year round, but how often are we looking at that data and reminding ourselves, and staying focused on it? And in case it's not, either if it's static or not moving upwards and looking good, the numbers, how often do we take stock of, hey, what should we be doing more to retain women professionals, people with disability, be it LGBT, be it any diverse demographic group that we're talking about? And I know this is about gender, so we can confine it to gender. So one is tone at the top. How frequently are we sending that message downstream that it is a top priority and we're focused on it? So that's one thing. Secondly, I do believe that There's something called now, how many of you have heard the term sponsorship in the corporate context? Show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the term sponsorship? Okay, sure, thank you so much. For the benefit of those who have not, here's the thing. For too long, we've just talked about mentorship, 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 and mentorship. Personally, honestly, and I'm not going to mince my words here, mentorship is important. It has its place still, but it's a thing of the past. It's no longer now the game changer. We all, in the course of our careers, acquire mentors, some proactively than others, and of course that helps, but it's now, the time has come for leaders to become sponsors for certain people in the organization whom they've identified as either high performers or people they want to groom to the next level to bridge that gap at the top. And what is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? Mentorship is more passive. It's about sharing experiences. How did I handle my challenges? The leader will tell you in his or her perspective what kinds of things he or she did to overcome challenges and to make it to wherever they are. Sponsorship is about creating new opportunities and we use the term apprentice in our organization at Deloitte. How many times are we proactively creating opportunities for our apprentices? High visibility projects. How often are we thumping the table, and we call them table pounders? Are we pounding the table for that individual every opportunity we get? And this whole expression of he for she, which was floated by the United Nations a couple of years ago, I think is very powerful. We do need male leadership to pound the table for women professionals to make it to the top. This is just a few of the many things that organizations need to do. I wanted to call out these two, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to add more as the conversation proceeds.
Yeah. Thanks, Amita. Any of you want to build on this?
I'll just add to it. The way I look at it, organizations were tweaked in the past, the environment in the organizations, I mean, were tweaked to the male population, right? But the fact is that you didn't have too many women in the senior leadership positions right from the start. So the way we work in some form or shape is attuned to an environment which was suitable for men. I think what is important today is now that that has changed and we have more women in those positions, what is that environment today? What is that inclusive environment today which we need to tweak to ensure that we have more and more women? So in my view, as far as a corporate is concerned, they have to go about creating that environment in a very structured fashion. So it's not overnight that I say that, okay, I change 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because there is an entire population of women with probably a different set of requirements that they bring to the table, which I think corporates have to be cognizant of and build that ecosystem in a fashion which is conducive and inclusive to them.
Thanks.
At the risk of being a heretic, or we'll call it whatever, right? I think very, very important for organizations to work with people to understand their mindsets, change mindsets. If you want to change mindsets, you've got to understand first what those mindsets are. And unless you do that, you will not bring about transformation or change. Now, yes, I agree with you completely. We need sponsors. We don't need mentors anymore, right? And while we will need sponsors, I think for those sponsors to succeed, it's not about sponsoring, to bring about gender diversity. It's not about sponsoring women. It's about making sure the men who are in the majority understand what it is for a woman to work that environment, right? One. Two, accept the difference. And three, while accepting difference, I say accept differences, it's perhaps the most difficult thing to do, right? But I think it's important to understand and accept those differences. And something is different, it's not necessarily difficult. And I think that's acceptance somewhere, you know? And I think while I'm saying this at a conceptual level, on a practical level, I think this can be done only through, driven from the top, with very, very strong communication and a clear direction. Last but not the least, the environment, if I'm going to change, if I'm going to change and do something different, I think it's important for organizations to look at what's in it for me to change. If I've been brought up in a certain way, to believe in a certain thing, to get me to change, I need to understand what's in it for me. And I think organizations sometimes don't spend enough time to understand the intricacies of that. And it's very, very critical for organizations to do that. And then say, it's not necessarily, I'm not talking about reward. I'm talking about why should somebody change? What are the motives, right? And I think if an organization is able to create that, then it's one thing to say create the right environment, but what does it mean? What does it entail? And if you ask me, the bitter truth, it's the majority that need to question their value systems and change. I'm not the majority, I know, but I know how the majority thinks, but I still would say the majority needs to change. That's the bitter truth, but it's the truth nevertheless. Yeah?
Thank you. So, good thought around sponsorship versus mentorship, and I think you touched on how the mindset can change. And definitely I agree that it begins with the management commitment, the senior team's commitment on this, whether it is to comply with something or it is really to the belief that it translates into the benefits that it does. And I think that belief percolating down, because I think there was a very good question about why should the men managers change? What is in it for them in the last session? And the belief that this is actually helping managers achieve their goals better is really something that needs to be percolated in the organization, thereby probably creating the sort of culture that is needed. It's a long journey, it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, and we've been talking about it for a long time. We still are in that journey and we have not really reached the last point of that journey. So we'll continue to talk about what is it that we need to do differently. What is it that organizations can do completely differently to take it there. So these are some of the points which have come up. I liked also something that was said around policies. So yes, maternity, there are some organizations, a year back we launched a 6-month maternity. Flexibility policies, we heard about elder care and maternity mobility. So that elder care, I think Hima touched on it very nicely around the daughter syndrome, I don't know what she said, but the guilt of the daughter. So when those stages come in, how do we deal with that and how do women deal with that? So what are the policies which help you take that forward? But something that I've learned in some of my organizations is also when there is a promotion, when there is a high potential being identified, are there enough questions and does the process really force the managers to think whether a woman was properly evaluated or not? So the systems, processes and the fairness really touching on some subconscious, unconscious biases which may come into the play. It may not happen, but at least the process stops it from happening. So thank you. With that, let's move on to the next aspect, which is around...
Rachna, may I just...
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just a quick point before we wrap this up, because I'm not sure if we'll get a chance to come back to it. I think Raju made a great point about organizations don't do enough about helping people understand what's in it for me, each one of them. And that is a valid point. It's very relevant, and unless we help people get better with that, bringing about change may not be easy. But my take on that is, you know, at least for all the years, and I've been in the space of diversity and inclusion for over 25 years now, the jargon around it's a business imperative, you know, it's good for everybody, it's good for your business, outcomes will be better, all of which is true. It doesn't seem to sink in. One second, hear me out please, and no offense meant. It doesn't seem to sink in. Hence, my suggestion is, why don't organizations make it either a mandate, B, reward inclusive behaviors, C, the flip side of the coin is, if a manager or a leader is not being inclusive and not encouraging diversity, then they should be dinged. If that's the language people in the corporate world understand, then so be it. Let's resort to that. Although that's not my preferred way of doing things, I think that people should buy into it. People should, it should eventually be part of our DNA to be more inclusive. But if people aren't getting it, then this is one way of helping people get it. So sorry, I just want to,
No, I
put
agree
it out
with you.
there.
No, I agree with you
Yeah.
in the sense that if you look at many programs, right, it starts with making it, you know, education. It starts
Sure.
with trying to see if you can change people's way of thinking. But a lot of times, including the most